Hi, I'm Mike Burrows, Agendashift founder, creator of Leading with Outcomes, and welcome to the Three Amigos Revisited Minimizing Failures of Context. Just a short video, and we're taking a fresh look at an Agile classic, the Three Amigos conversation, thinking about it less in process terms, thinking it more organizationally. And to get us started, we need to think about failure. We need to think about failures of flow, where things get delayed, where rework is happening, where we're overburdened, all those kind of things. Things that I wrote a lot about in my first book, Kanban from the Inside. Failures of process, perhaps the process wasn't followed, or perhaps more insidiously, everyone did follow the process, but it didn't give us the results that we wanted. Sometimes I've written about failures of leadership. Now, fairly or unfairly, if we stand beside a failure of flow or a failure of process for too long, it gets attached to us. Now, we don't want that. Now, back to that first book, Kanban from the Inside, I found one helpful way of reframing failures of flow, failures of process, was as failures of collaboration. It doesn't work for every kind of failure, but surprisingly often it's a really helpful way of looking at it. Were our collaborations effective? Did we collaborate in the right way? Were our collaborations timely? And that has worked really well. But a new framing, and it's in my 2025 book, Wholehearted, Engaging with Complexity in the Deliberately Adaptive Organization, we're talking about failures of context. A failure that happened because either operationally or strategically, we didn't have the context that we needed when we made a decision. In delivery, we didn't understand enough of the strategic context. In the strategic decision making, we didn't understand enough about realities on the ground, inside the organization or in relationship with our customers, our suppliers, whatever. And this particular failure of context, is not like the others. The others we can think of as problems to solve. Failures of context, we can only minimize them. And to minimize them takes effort. We have to be present. We have to be paying attention. We have to be ready to listen. We have to be ready to share. That is how context gets shared around the organization. And it can only be minimized because frankly, there is only so much communication capacity and decision-making capacity around. Those resources are finite, and it's that limitation, that constraint, that gives rise to failures of context. So how do we diagnose them? How do we start even to fix them? Let's think about where we noticed a failure, some kind of failure of context. A bad decision is made. Now, we could blame where we note the activity in which we noticed the problem, but let's think more broadly about how we got here. And one good way of doing this in a way that doesn't point the finger of blame prematurely, or doesn't blame at all, is to split the process into two. And we can think about the relationships between the upstream part of the process and the downstream part of the process, upstream and downstream, relative to where we noticed the problem. And we can ask questions like this. Is one side doing what might be better done by the other, or in collaboration, or deferred until needed, particularly with this challenge of context in mind? But there's a shortcut you can take, and I give credit for this to my friend Philippe Genet. Do we coordinate, cooperate, or collaborate across this relationship? If we're coordinating our habits, our tools, our understood process, our boards, our stand-up meetings, all those kind of things, the infrastructure that makes the process work, we can rely on that, and the work is going to just flow through our process. Do we need to cooperate? We're talking multiple people. We're talking about breaking the work down, agreeing points of synchronization, points of integration, that kind of thing. Or do we need something deeper? Do we need to collaborate? Collaborate in a way that will generate things that generate ideas, generate products that perhaps we hadn't thought about or can't have thought about until we actually do the work. So are we coordinating, cooperating, or collaborating across this relationship? Are we coordinating, cooperating, collaborating in that upstream process, in a way that gives the downstream process the context it needs. And in that downstream process, are we coordinating, cooperating, collaborating? Now, I'm labouring those three words, but of course it's about how we interact with each other. And it's a great way of improving the process. But here's the health warning. Process improvement takes you only so far. You can't eliminate those failures of context just with more process, just with more detailed specification and so on. You need some informal stuff as well. And often it's what's around the process rather than the process itself that makes it work. And we need a conversation that's specific to the piece of work. We need to ask around this particular piece of work at the beginning of the process, just as we're starting the work, are we coordinating, cooperating, or collaborating? And that conversation that's at the beginning of the work starting, that in Agile terms is the Three Amigo conversations, or what people have come to call it. More recently, reflecting a shift in mind share, if not power, we have the product triad or the product troika. Now, the issue here isn't that it's exactly three people, product dev QA or product design and technology. It's that it's the right people at the right time. It's a timely conversation, informal enough, ad hoc enough that you can have it not only at the start of the piece of work, but whenever it's needed. Whenever there's more ambiguity than there should be, more ambiguity than you are comfortable with. And the great thing about this conversation, just by asking, should we coordinate, cooperate, collaborate, visualizing how this is going to work, it's a sense-making conversation. Already we're getting a better idea of what this work is about, a very cheap and effective way of getting people onto the same page. And at the end of the process, we can reflect on it and ask ourselves, did we make the right calls? Are we coordinating, cooperating, collaborating in the right way by default? And did we make the right calls for each piece of work? Do we avoid paying the cost of collaboration when coordination would have done? Did we cooperate or collaborate where we needed to? And you can think empathetically about others' need for context as you think about your own need for context. So some three quick takeaways. First of all, a bit of career advice. Don't tolerate repeated failures long enough for it to look like a failure of leadership. It might be completely unfair that it looks that way, but that is something to avoid. Secondly, if you see something that looks like a failure of flow or a failure of process, try thinking about it as a failure of collaboration or a failure of context. Just thinking about it in that different way may help you get a better understanding of what's going on, help you debug the process, help you improve the process. And don't look down on those Three Amigos conversations. A timely conversation is worth its weight in gold. And that simple question, should we be coordinating, cooperating, or collaborating, is a very efficient way of getting a better sense of what is going on, recognizing our need for context, working out who else we might need to talk to, and so on. So it's a context sharing opportunity, a sense making opportunity, and a trigger for other conversations. Now, if, like me, you think you've exhausted taking a primarily process-based approach to things and you need to understand things more organizationally, then my new book, Wholehearted, is for you. Search Amazon for Wholehearted Mike Burrows. It's available in other places as well, but Amazon is where the 5-star reviews are. And you can also check out the adaptive organization training, and there's workshops as well at leadingwithoutcomes.com. You'll find some online self-paced training. There's also training that authorized trainers can deliver, and workshops that authorized facilitators can deliver too. And maybe you yourself will be interested in becoming one. But your first point of call, I think the book Wholehearted, Engaging with Complexity in the Deliberately Adaptive Organization. Enjoy.